You're listening to the Unframe of Mind show, the place to have the most mind-stretching, unprotected intellectual intercourse of your life. Your host, Daniel Wagner, battles the forces of evil by lobbing fiery balls of truth, reason, and evidence over safe room walls.
So, I would like to welcome y'all back to yet another episode of the Unframe of Mind show. I'm your host, Daniel Wagner, and today I'm going to be speaking with my friend Gleb Tsipursky. He runs the nonprofit organization Intentional Insights, of which he is the president and co-founder. Now, you might recognize him from a previous episode we had where we discussed the Pro-Truth Pledge. And no worries if you haven't seen it yet, the links will be found in the description below. I think it's an excellent starter to get, kind of a primer to get you ready for this conversation, but you don't necessarily have to listen to it to understand what's going on here. I would like to welcome you to the show, Gleb.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be on.
Hey, I was super excited when you reached out to me again and told me you had a new project you've been working on and you wanted to work to promote that and give people a nice guide to help them with their critical thinking. Would you care to jump into that and tell me a little bit about it?
Sure. So my book, The Truth Seeker's Handbook, a Science-Based Guide, is the guide. So it's a #1 Amazon bestseller. So folks should know that it's a popular book. And it focuses on how we can evaluate reality clearly and make good decisions. It's something I've been working on for the last 4 years. So the book is the outcome of these 4 years of effort. And more broadly, I guess for much longer than that, I've been about a decade in graduate school and academia studying how people think, how they make decisions, how individuals, groups, institutions make decisions, how those decisions go right. And the book is about how to prevent that. So we as human beings are not really adapted for the modern world. We are adapted for the savanna environment. And as a result, our thinking patterns go wrong in a whole bunch of situations, which this book talks about. And the book helps people figure out where their thinking patterns are likely to go wrong and cause them to make disastrous decisions, and how they can change that for themselves, and also how they can guide those around them to be more oriented toward actually evaluating reality as it is and making good decisions so that everyone can achieve their goals.
Now, it seems like it's been quite the work of love for you for quite a few years now, especially as I'm reading through and looking at this collection of stories and ideas and things you have put together in this book. It seems like you really have taken quite a bit of time to really study the intricacies of how we actually think on a cognitive level versus a lot of people think that their public education system is doing them justice and teaching them how to critically think, but it just turns out that's really not the case. Is that fair to say?
It's absolutely the case. I mean, our educational system is not really designed to help people think critically. It's designed to help people pass a series of exams that are set for people to pass. So there's a common concept that what gets measured gets managed. So what gets measured for schools is how students do in exams. So that's mainly based on repetition and the kind of writing skills. It's not really based on critical thinking. Schools aren't teaching critical thinking. That's one. Second, even if they wanted to teach critical thinking, the stuff that I'm talking about is not available at the educational level. People don't know about it. This is cutting-edge research that's been really recent research about how we as human beings think. This is stuff that's available mainly to behavioral scientists, experts, and that's my background is in behavioral science, and who have been on the cutting edge of research about what are the studies showing about how we as human beings think, how we feel, how we make our decisions, and how do those decisions steer us awry. So, for example, if schools want to teach critical thinking, they'd probably go to things like, there's the id, the ego, the superego, or something like that about our emotions and how we regulate those. But that's not really what the recent research shows. The old Freudian model is not applicable to actually how our brain works.
Right.
So the Freudian model of our brain presumes that we can't engage with our emotions. That we are completely separate from our emotions, and we have this separate kind of logic and separate emotions. That's not the case at all. So we have two systems of thinking. One is the intuitive, gut intuitions, the gut responses. Some scholars call it system one. I prefer this term autopilot system. So it's the quick, fast reactions. The autopilot system is the gut reaction, our habitual thinking patterns. What feels comfortable, what feels convenient, what feels true.
I like that
and that's,
term.
That's,
that term autopilot. I like how that sounds. It makes more sense. And when I think of the autopilot system, I think about, when you're just going on about your day, you may go through 3 or 4 hours and not even realize stuff that you've done or said, or it just is who you are throughout the day without even thinking.
Yep, that's exactly. Without even thinking is the right way of describing it. It's just our habits, who we are, what we do, what feels right, what feels intuitive. Now, that system, the autopilot system, is really well adapted for the savanna environment, for living in small groups, small tribes, for dealing with saber-toothed tigers, fleeing from them, that's a flight response, freezing when there's something that might be stalking you, or that's the freeze response, or the fight response when someone attacks your tribe or attacks you within the tribe. So that's the gut reactions, So when your boss is giving you constructive criticism, your intuitive response is to either shout back or shut down.
Or go on the defense in some fashion or another, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the intuitive response. That's the autopilot system. Now, we also have another system of thinking, the intentional system. The intentional system is the logical, reasonable one. It's the system when you're making plans for the future, when you're sitting down thinking hard, when you're doing math problems, when you're thinking about abstract theoretical concepts. And that's the system when you actually notice what you're doing throughout the day, because it's actually pretty hard to use. Our brain is lazy. We as human beings are lazy thinkers. So it's a fundamental aspect of who we are that we're lazy thinkers. This intentional system takes a lot of energy to use. It's not easy. You can feel your brain working hard when you're using it. So that's the intentional system as opposed to the autopilot system, which is, it doesn't take much effort at all. It's just very habitual.
Right.
Now, they are not separate systems. They are interconnected. You can use your intentional system to retrain your autopilot system. So you're not doomed to just be going on autopilot. You're not doomed to kind of, shout back at your boss and be defensive. You can learn the skill of actually incorporating the constructive criticism that your boss is providing into your performance and doing better in the future. That's the ideal way of engaging with constructive criticism from your boss. Far from everyone does it.
and then learning how to like short circuit those automatic reactions and be able to react in a more clear thinking kind of way.
Exactly. It's a hard thing to do, but the people who do it are the ones who succeed and rise up in the company, and the ones who don't, end up, either staying where they are at their current level in the organization or being fired. So this is the kind of thing the book is about. How do we not get fired from the road of life? And how do we succeed in the road of life? Because it takes a lot of understanding where our emotions are, and how do we use the intentional system to correct the many, many, many mistakes the autopilot system makes. And it's not something that we need to blame ourselves for. It's not, the autopilot system is not bad. A lot of people come and say, well, how can I stop using the autopilot system? I tell them, no, you should not stop using the autopilot system. What you need to recognize is that we are not evolved for the current environment, that we can use our intentional system to trigger us to recognize when we're in a situation that's not similar to the ancient environment. So for example, when we're engaging with our friends, friendly conversation, whatever, we can pick up on their social cues, what they're doing, what they're engaging, how they're engaging with us. That's a good place to use the autopilot system. It's pretty similar to the tribal environment. Now, when we're engaging with Facebook and seeing all the streams of information coming at us, that's a situation where we should not rely on the autopilot system at all, because it's very different from the environment to which we're adapted for.
No.
So that's the situation where we need to use the intentional system.
I noticed you said people should not use that system when they're scrolling through their Facebook feed. I feel like there's a little more there to unwrap behind that.
Sure. So should not, I say, so the purpose of this book is to help people figure out the truth about reality in order to make good decisions to reach their goals. That's kind of the supernatural version of what this book is about. If you're going on Facebook and if you're going with your autopilot system, you're not going to make good decisions. You're not going to see reality clearly, and you're not going to make good decisions, and therefore you're not going to reach your goals. Because Facebook is set up to appeal to our gut reactions in such a way as to make us feel that something is true and accurate even when it's not. So that is a big, big problem with Facebook in terms of how we engage with Facebook around news, around information. So Facebook, so for example, there was a study that by Stanford University that showed that, and that was on savvy social media users and students and so on. And they were shown some articles. And the people who were shown the articles thought that articles with a bigger and more bright and vivid image, graphic image, were more accurate. Now, are they actually more accurate? Now, when you think about it, you'll realize, no, of course they're not accurate if they have a nicer graphic image. There's nothing.
Right. It doesn't logically follow.
I
said, right. It doesn't logically follow. That makes perfect sense.
It does not logically follow. But when you're in the moment and you're scrolling Facebook and you see a nice graphic image, you feel better about that article because it feels more convincing to your autopilot system, because our autopilot system it engages much better with visual imagery than with text, because obviously text wasn't around in the savannah. Visual imagery was. So if it has a nice engaging graphic image, it feels nicer to us. And we as human beings have one of our basic fundamental errors is mistaking comfort and convenience for truth and goodness. So we make the mistake that if something is comfortable, feels comfortable to us. If it's convenient, it matches our gut reactions. And our gut reactions, pretty much the same as our autopilot system. It feels good to us. So whatever feels good to us, we think then, therefore, it is A, true, and B, good for us, which is a basic mistake that Facebook preys upon, and people who try to manipulate us prey upon in order to manipulate us into bad decisions. I mean, same reason that advertisers put, sexy men and sexy women next to cars, because we feel good about seeing the sexy men and sexy women, and therefore we feel good about the cars, and therefore we want to buy the cars. Now,
so
obviously it doesn't follow that the car is good.
The same reason. Right.
It's the same reasoning.
So the same reason they put all of the snacks and candies and drinks right up next to the checkout lane when you're on your way out of the store.
Mm-hmm.
Just to kind of short circuit that reflex. That's why they call it the impulse buy aisle.
Yes, exactly. So it would feel comfortable to us because we are tempted to have it. It feels good to us, so we have that intuition. The same way that it may feel good to us to have that, second and third piece of chocolate cake. We may self-reflectively, if we think about it away from the chocolate cake, or think about it later, we're like, oh, I would not want myself to eat more than one slice of chocolate cake, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
In that moment, it's very hard to convince yourself that that second piece of chocolate cake, which feels comfortable and convenient to us, it's like, wouldn't it be nice? It would be pleasant. Mm-hmm. It's a feeling of pleasantness. So that gut reaction, that autopilot system is pushing us to take it. And when we are...
Something about that mouth pleasure, that eighth piece of fudge.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's mouth pleasure, exactly. So that is really tempting to us, and when we feel ourselves trying to resist it, that's when we're using our intentional system, our logical system, to be like, no, wait, I remember that I will not feel good about it, it's not going to match my health goals. So that's the kind of tension that we feel. In that sort of tension, we feel the autopilot system versus the intentional system. In the same way that, when you see an article on Facebook and when you're tempted to share it and you're thinking, wait, maybe I should fact check this, maybe it's not accurate. You see another sort of subtension where you have a temptation to share an article because it feels true to you, it feels good. But if you have taken the pro-truth pledge, or if you're just kind of committed to not sharing inaccurate information, then you're going to take the time to fact check. So you can see a resistance. You can see this tension between the autopilot system and the intentional system at that time.
So now all this kind of seems to presuppose that people are on their Facebook feeds, and when they share articles, they're really trying to offer information to their friends and family. But I think it has more to do with, at least for most folks, it has more to do with trying to look a certain way in front of your friends. And if this is the kind of article headline that would kind of mesh with, your social circle, then I'm going to go ahead and post that so that they think I'm this. I don't know that there's a whole lot of people really going and taking the time to click the article, read it, fact check it, make sure it's good, share it. And, some people, yes, but I don't think the vast majority of people are doing that. You see what I'm saying there?
I totally see what you're saying, Daniel, and I hope the listeners of your show are trying to do that.
Right.
So I think you're right. So there is a basic challenge, with people not doing that. And that's the topic that we talked about in the previous show, kind of, with the Pro-Truth Pledge at protruthpledge.org is intended to, in part, counteract this behavior, not simply among people who are already fact-checking. So it is the case. We actually, something that we did since the last time we talked, we conducted a study of people who take the Pro-Truth Pledge, which is make a commitment to truthful behaviors. Mm-hmm. And we found that people who take the Pro-Truth Pledge, who they already tend to be truthfully oriented, they actually behave quite a bit more truthfully after they take the Pro-Truth Pledge. So they do more fact-checking and so on, and calling people out who share inaccurate information. So it's already helpful even for those people who are already oriented toward truthfulness. But even more important is the impact on their social network because of a phenomenon called network effects. So there's research showing that we have a surprisingly strong impact on people close to us in social networks. So, for example, if we stop smoking, then there's about a 67% chance that our spouse will stop smoking, and that there's about a 30-ish% chance that our friends will stop smoking, and something 20-ish% chance that our brother or sister will stop smoking.
That makes sense.
So, yeah, we have that effect on people around us. So in a similar way, if we take the Pro-Truth Pledge, or if we start fact-checking, or if we start calling people out who share misinformation, then we will have that impact on the people around us. So there is an impact you can make on those people through your own behaviors.
So have you found, this has been a challenge for me on my show. I'm wondering if you were experiencing the same kind of thing where it actually seems to be a bit of a struggle to find people that are even interested in trying to be better thinkers and trying to actually hone that skill and improve that as a feature of their personality. Is that something you've been running into as well?
Actually, not that much. Like I said, the book is a #1 Amazon bestseller for a reason. There are people who actually want to improve their thinking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
I'm sure the members of your show are people who want to improve their thinking, who want to be better at orienting toward having healthy thought patterns. The nonprofit that where I serve as a volunteer president, Intentional Insights at intentionalinsights.org, is devoted to this, helping people improve their thinking, and we have a number of people who are enthusiastic about it, who are followers and supporters, read the articles and so on.
You know what?
Yes.
That might, come to think of it, it might have more to do just from our perspectives in terms of the circles we come up around, because you're spend a lot of time in more of the college area or the research and development kind of arena, if you will, and mm-hmm. I currently spend a lot of time in the blue collar working class, manufacturing plant type level. So I'm getting a very different view of the people around me than I would suspect you are. So that would make some sense why you're seeing things differently.
I know plenty of people with a blue-collar background who are interested in this stuff and who engage with Intentional Insights, who engage with me, people who are passionate about improving their thinking. That doesn't describe, or how do I say this? They tell me that most of the people around them in the blue-collar background, who come from blue-collar background, aren't as interested in this as they are.
Mm-hmm,
but
right.
There seem to be a number of people in the blue-collar background who are quite interested in this and who benefit from engaging with Intentional Insights articles. Again, engaging with their boss better, engaging with their relationships
Right.
better.
That's why Lee and I actually connected with each other, because we were both working at the same place and were experiencing these higher minded discussions were very stimulating to us, and we enjoyed it, and it's like few and far between, but there are people out there, of course, and that's true with any general population segment, but it's just kind of interesting how our different perspectives would lend to our view on how interested people are in just the idea of improving their critical thinking skills.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure that there are less people in blue-collar backgrounds who are interested in improving their critical thinking skills, partially because they have less time, they have less energy, and so on.
I got told there was something wrong with me today because I wasn't interested in sports and football. It's like, it's not really the thing I'm into. I'm into different things. Anyway,
that's frustrating.
So to take a slightly different direction here, I was really curious. Sorry, I was really curious why. I know you study this stuff a lot, and it's kind of become your entire mission. And I was really curious, why is it so important? Like, what's the actual driving force for you that makes all this so worthwhile in chasing down?
So it all comes down to utilitarianism, and utilitarianism is the moral, ethical stance of wanting the most good for the most number. So that's what I want, and I want people to have good lives, and I want people to do well for themselves. And I find that the most fundamental thing in our lives, if we think about what's going on in our lives, the most fundamental thing in our lives, the thing that's really under our control, the only thing that's under our control, are our thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. That's the only thing that we can't control. We can't control other people. We can't control the world around us, kind of the physical world. We can only control our thoughts, our behaviors, and our feelings. So if those are the only things that are under our control, in order for people to have the best lives that they can, which I want people to have, then it would be great for me to help people manage and improve their thoughts, their behaviors, and their feelings, so that those people can accomplish their own goals better and have the best lives possible. And so that's what my passion is, focusing on helping people improve their thoughts, behaviors, and feelings in such a way that those people can accomplish their goals and have happy lives, fulfilled lives, lives of flourishing. And this book is a means of doing that. So all of my activities are a means of doing that to some extent or another. Some of them are very targeted, like the Pro-Truth Pledge, which orients toward addressing misinformation in public discourse, and therefore helping people have better thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in that arena. And the book is a very broad way of doing that. So it addresses all areas of life, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in all life areas. So that's my passion. That's why I wrote this book, and kind of that's what's driving me.
Yeah, I had a feeling there was a strong central vision behind this, because nobody works as hard as you do on writing and putting out content if they aren't being driven by something. So that's great. That's great to hear your perspective on that, for sure. Another question I had for you was, I was wondering if you had an example of a belief that you had an attachment to, in the past, and maybe had a hard time letting go, but kind of had no choice but to let go because of mounting evidence to the well, crap, I can't think of the word. To the contrary. Sorry. To the contrary.
Yeah. Sure. A number of beliefs. So let's see. What was
just give us the big one. I'm sure there's one shining light that shines out in your mind.
Well, let me give you one on public policy and one about private life.
Okay.
One about public policy was about basic income. So basic income is an approach to wealth, to providing social support for people by giving them chunks of money, just money to do with whatever they want per certain period of time, let's say per month. So when I first heard about it, I was pretty skeptical that this would work. I always thought, well, we want to give them certain specific goods like, housing and food and so on to have a basic welfare net. But over time, when I saw research on basic income, I saw that people who received basic income didn't spend it on, kind of luxury goods or like alcohol, tobacco, drugs, kind of this sort of stuff, that they actually used it pretty well. That's one. Second, that basic income is much cheaper to give to people than creating, things like places for them to sleep and soup kitchens and so on, and welfare agencies with large government bureaucracies and so on. So because this satisfies people's needs quite well, and because it doesn't create a large bureaucracy around this, providing them with social goods, I had to update my beliefs over time as I saw more and more research to accept that basic income is much more effective than I thought it was, and that ideally we would have a system like this, which would be much cheaper for us as a country than what we have right now.
All
so
right.
that was one public policy
All
update. Right. And then in private life, I over time updated my beliefs about cryonics, what's also called cryonics. So when people are frozen, instead of being cremated or buried in some way, and to basically, when I saw some more research about this and some studies that there's maybe about maybe a 1 or 2% chance that you can be cryonically preserved and actually be revived at some point in the future. And so that was a pretty major update in my beliefs too, that, okay, this is something that, when people think about death and dying and, all that stuff, is a kind of a pretty major life area thing. So I updated my beliefs to that area as being quite important for me to orient toward cryonics instead of other ways of body disposal, essentially. So that was another major change in my activities. I had others if you want me to go on, but those are two major ones.
No, those are good examples. So that's all I had for you. Is there any other specific things you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
So the one thing I want to leave people with is to remind them that all of the listeners of the show are responsible for managing their own thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. And it doesn't sound intuitive. It doesn't feel comfortable. What do you mean I'm responsible for those sorts of things? It feels very easy to think that, that person outside of me who did a negative thing for me, he's responsible for my anger, or, my boss is responsible for my job. But really, in the end, each one of us is responsible for our lives, for our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Nobody's going to give us anything. People may care for us, people may love us, but they put themselves in the center of their universe. So each one of us is responsible for putting ourselves at the center of our universe and focusing on addressing and improving the only things that we can control, which are our thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. And that's what the book is about, the Truth Seeker's Handbook, a science-based guide. How do you actually figure out what your thoughts and feelings and behaviors are and how you can control them? How can you get them under your control so that you can reach your goals and have the kind of life you want? So I want everyone to have the kind of life that they want. And consider checking out my book, The Truth Seeker's Handbook, a science-based guide, or some other resources at intentionalinsights.org or elsewhere that will help them manage their own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. That's the only thing that people have under their control. And if they don't control that, they don't control anything.
All right, you heard it from the man himself. Take some damn responsibility for your actions, and maybe you can change your life. Maybe you can actually have some impact over the things that you do in your life instead of just blaming the world for everything that happens to you. It seems like such a much, much freer world when I turned and made that decision to start, proactively taking control of my life. So I want to thank you for coming on the show and letting us know about your book, and I will be sure to include all those links in the description below.
Thank you, Daniel. It was a pleasure once again.
Wow, was that not the best ideagasm you've ever had? Want to do it again? Go to unframeofmind.com to find more mind-stretching, world-altering podcasts, videos, and articles, and get those critical thinking juices flowing.